the customers that were our healthiest customers, the customers that brought in the most users, built the most processes, retained the longest, were the ones that were using the product for really high stakes work, where there was really a large cost in some way to not following the process.
Welcome to SaaS That App, building B2B web applications, the podcast where we share real-world stories, practical advice, and tech insights for those building or thinking about starting a tech-enabled business. I'm your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks.
And I'm Justin Edwards. Each week we bring you the stories, strategies, and insights you need to build your SaaS or tech-enabled business smarter, not harder. Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome back to SaaS That App. With me as always across the microphone in his current beachwear because it's nicer there than it is here, Justin Edwards. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Aaron, doing pretty well. Still got Airbnb digs behind me, but we're getting closer every day.
Hey, man, that house is going to be spectacular. I cannot wait to see it, and I know you guys can't wait to get in it. Joining us today also, we welcome Vinay Patankar. Vinay is the co-founder and CEO of Process Street, which is a workflow management platform that helps teams transform their recurring operations like onboarding and compliance and document control into automated trackable systems and workflows. Now, Vinay's journey spans from running remote teams and online ventures of other kinds into building one of the most widely used tools for process management, which is now actually evolving into an AI-powered compliance platform. So we're going to get into that today. He is passionate about how automation and human creativity can work together. And his company's recent recognition by AWS highlights just how far that vision has come. Vinay, welcome to the pod.
Hey, great to be here, Aaron and Justin.
So glad to have you. So I always like to start at the beginning if I can and ask the big difficult question of the day. How did your personal technical journey begin? Did I read somewhere you were the youngest Cisco engineer in Australia at like age 16?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Personal technical. Don't get asked that much as the CEO. So yeah, I grew up in Australia. My dad was actually a IT engineer, later became a IT trainer. So he used to train a lot of the programs and certification courses for Microsoft and Cisco and a bunch of these big technology companies in America. And when I was a kid, I was super into computers. The whole house was full of computers. And I was lucky he networked up our whole house and helped me build my first computer. And through that, I got into gaming. And back then, you'd build your own computer when you wanted to game. I was very into Counter-Strike. I was like top 50 in Australia in Counter-Strike.
Nice.
And kind of through that love of gaming, it really accelerated my adoption of computers and technology. And so I got really into computers. I started taking over management of our internal network at home and started becoming tech support for all my friends and family. And through my dad, who helped me with learning all about computers, I also got my Cisco certifications when I was 16. And so usually it's like something you would do after you graduate with a computer science degree, and then you go and you specialize in a particular technology. But because I had access to all the routers and switches, and back then it's like, these are tens of thousands of dollars of routers that no one would buy for their home because they're meant for commercial use. And I kind of was lucky to have access to all of this at home, and that allowed me to get a lot of experience and develop those skills. And it was really great. When I was 16, I got my first job as a systems administrator working for an office in the city, and all my friends were still at school working at McDonald's, and it was a great experience. And that was kind of my exposure. So I started IT, networking, kind of technology that way. And then I really didn't go fully into computer science as my degree in university. I actually studied business and finance. But once I had those skills, I was now building websites and modding games and very into computers. And so that was my technology background. I'm not a coder. I don't say that I can code. I can hack code, but I definitely have a strong fundamental background in technology.
Fantastic. Yeah, that mirrors a lot of folks' journeys, I think. I was in a similar situation with my dad. He was an electrical engineer from very early on. And I remember when he brought home the Apple IIe for me to take apart and put back together. It's like, well, this is cool.
Yeah.
Is that like an early iPhone, Aaron?
Oh my gosh.
Apple didn't really make its way down to Australia until a bit later. So we were still very much in the PC world down in Australia while Apple was launching in the US. And it took a while. It was probably like the Macintosh or something that really started to get penetration in Australia. But I think it was like 386 or something was the first computer my dad brought home.
Yeah, similar experience for me too. I wanted to play computer games, super into gaming, but I had no money. And so it's like, well, the part cost the amount of money that I had. So I guess I would be figuring out how to install this because I can't pay to have anyone else do it. And
Totally.
it just kind of starts the snowball rolling down the hill. And sometime later in the future, you end up with a technology company, or at least that's what happened to me. So
yeah, I feel like there's been a bit of a regression in the hardware side where the Macs and the phones, they're not really customizable, right? You just get the product and there's nothing you can really change. You're not building your computers anymore. Although I do think that's kind of changing now with vibe coding, where it's making now the software layer a lot more accessible than it used to be. I hear lots of stories about 9-year-old kids vibe coding their own games and stuff now, which is kind of the equivalent of you building your own computer to game back in the day.
Right, yeah. Everybody gets the Commodore and then they get the weekly magazine with the game of the week or whatever and programming it in.
Exactly.
So can you connect the dots between your first network administrator job that you had in the office in the city and then kind of moving into, you did some accounting for a while and ended up starting your first like marketing company? Like help me come along the journey with you there.
Yeah. So I basically lost my job as a sysadmin in Sydney because the company went bankrupt. And I think one of the things that I'd seen in my father's career that wasn't very attractive was he was a Cisco engineer and a Microsoft engineer. And so you're kind of like working inside this technology stack. But to be relevant and to kind of keep your job, you had to continuously reskill in the latest technology. So Windows NT would come out and then Windows XP would come out. And so you'd have to redo all your certifications. And it was almost like you're just constantly in school all the time, where you got to go back and do these exams every 2 or 3 years. And you see the same thing happening today in AWS and the cloud and stuff like that with the new technologies. But I wasn't really a big fan of school in general. The idea of like having to do exams for the rest of my life was not appealing to me. And my dad gave me this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when I was a kid, when I was 15, and I read that. And I think one of the things that I just saw was there was just, if you're on the business side, there's a lot more room to grow your career versus what I saw from how my dad's career was in IT, which was very much like working for a telco or a bank and working on the IT team there, which was very different to being in technology in San Francisco today, right? Where you're like, oh, what do you mean there's a cap on the upside of technology? You know, if you're going to be an engineer or something, that's not true today. But if you were kind of working back then in the back office in the IT team and it's a cost center, it actually wasn't the most glamorous career. So I decided to study business in school instead of IT. I also knew that I already knew a lot about IT, but I didn't know a lot about business. So it was kind of bridging that gap. And by the time I graduated, I became an accountant during university. That was like an undergraduate job that I had. And then my first job out of university was actually, I was a recruiter for software developers. So I worked recruiting software developers for a lot of the banks and telcos in Sydney. It's kind of like a sales job with commission, but I got to talk about technology all day and use what I'd learned about technology. So it was a kind of good bridge between my business and technology backgrounds. While I was doing that, I started just tinkering with websites. So just on the side, just for fun, I launched different websites. They were mostly content websites. I think the first one my first dollar that I ever made on the internet was a website called 123CFD. That was basically, I probably don't even know what CFDs are in America, but it's kind of like options or futures. It's a different type of financial derivative. So I made basically a wiki on educating people about this particular financial derivative and just put up AdSense ads. And that was the first money that I made online. But that gave me exposure to not just how to build a website, but also how to monetize and get traffic to a website, which was a big unlock for me. And that was my first taste. After that, I decided to do the very common Australian thing of doing a 1-year backpacking walkabout journey around the world. I mean, if you've ever been to a hostel, you'll see it's full of Australians. And so it's very common for Australia, all your friends do it, and it's quite culturally ingrained in Australia to want to take a gap year and kind of do a backpacking trip. So I did that. And once I started traveling around, I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I'm like, I don't really know where I'm going to go. But I started meeting a lot of people who were working on the internet and they were living in, these beautiful places like you are, Justin, in Puerto Vallarta, like working on the internet. I'm like, wait, I want to do that. And that was kind of my first exposure to people actually living as entrepreneurs. I'd never really met an entrepreneur before. I mean, I met some people who ran the local plumbing company in my neighborhood or were a builder or a CPA, but I never really understood people who were building internet businesses. That wasn't something I was ever exposed to. And once I started researching and started really talking to some of these people and understanding, how much money they were making. And a lot of the time it wasn't like they were making millions of dollars. They were just making the same that I would make in my salary back home, but doing it from a beach in Thailand. And that to me was extremely exciting and appealing. And so I started researching and testing different products and ended up launching my first Shopify store while I was traveling around as a backpacker. And that was kind of the beginning. And I just learned everything myself, YouTube, just figured out how to build my theme and launch the store. And luckily, I'd already had some exposure to marketing some of the websites that I'd built before. And yeah, I was off to the races. I really didn't make much money at the beginning. I made a lot less than I was making as a recruiter, but I also needed a lot less because I was living in these really affordable places. And I was able to commit a lot of time to the business because I didn't have a job. And that really allowed me to grow and learn quickly and continuously launch different projects and websites to the point where I was making more than I was making back home. So I was like, I'm never going home then.
That is fantastic. Well, I want to jump ahead just a little bit to Vitoto. I don't know too much about that personally. So tell me a little bit about what the planned mission of Vitoto was.
So once I'd kind of figured out some of these bootstrapped internet businesses that I'd run, and I got up to the point where I was making the same as my salary in Australia, then I was making double my salary in Australia, then I was making 4 times my salary in Australia. I was like, well, there's no way I'm ever going to go back and put on a suit and turn up in an office at 8:30 in the morning again, right?
Excellent decision.
Also, I had money. I was like, oh, wow, I've got 6 figures in my bank account. Like, this never happened before. Like, let's do something with it. Let's try to take some bigger swings. And that ability to be able to take those bets allowed me to start thinking about ideas and concepts for more ambitious businesses. And this is really, I think, one of the most important pieces about being an entrepreneur that people don't really understand is that when you make the flip from having a job to being an entrepreneur, it doesn't really matter what you do at the beginning. It's just once you are in this mode of operating where you're working for yourself, you're building systems, you're looking for opportunities, and you actually are able to capitalize on those opportunities because you've already got an LLC set up, you've already got a team, you've already got some customers, you've already got some revenue. The difference between launching like a second product inside an existing infrastructure like that versus having to quit your job and put everything on the line and then like go and launch a first product to see whether or not it's going to work. The difference in risk from launching that product for the person who's already got a business to the person who doesn't is massive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the journey of entrepreneurship is this gift that people don't understand at the beginning, because at the beginning it's really hard. And a lot of the time what you're working on at the beginning may not be the thing that actually is the thing that you can go back to your family and say, hey, this was the better decision than me sticking with my career, right? That first thing is probably not going to be that, right? It's probably going to be the second or third or fifth thing that you do that then is the thing that, okay, actually unlocks. But you wouldn't have got to the fifth thing if you didn't first do the first thing. So yeah, I was kind of in that position. I had some money in the bank. I had time. I had a team. And I had the ability to now start testing different ideas. And I wanted to do something that was much more impactful. I also wanted to build an asset that I could sell. A lot of the businesses that I was running were more service-based and weren't really a defendable asset. They were more just marketing campaigns that kind of grew and died based on the whims of the internet. And I always was fascinated by technology. And so that was kind of my dream, was to go and build a Silicon Valley startup, right? So Vitoto came about. It wasn't really a strategy. It was very much like, oh, this would be cool. Idea for a product.
Some of the best ideas come out of that.
Totally, yeah. It was more about the phones were coming out. The day the iPhone 3G launched in Australia, I bought it, right? And the first iPhone didn't come out in Australia. It was only the iPhone 2, the 3G. And I'd always been fascinated. I dreamt about this device before it came out. I'm like, when is there going to be a device that I can have like the internet and email in my pocket? I knew this device was coming, and the moment it got launched, I was like, I have to have it. And from that point, I continuously upgraded my phone, every version. I think this was probably 4 or 4G or whatever it was. The 4S maybe was the next one that came out. It was around then. And so it kind of was reverse engineering from just using the phone and just thinking about what can this unlock, right? What is the potential of this device? What are people going to be using this device for in the future? Really thinking about it from like a technology first perspective versus a business problem or a consumer problem perspective. And video became very obvious. Like video is going to be one of the most important features and uses of this device. And I experienced that. Everyone around me was experiencing it. So that was the kind of the initial spark. And then we're like, okay, how can we do video in a way that is native to mobile and utilizes a lot of the technology that exists in these devices? And it was GPS, and it was wireless, and it was mobile editing, and it was these kind of like components that you could see were kind of bubbling up in different ways on the device, right, through different tools and technology. And I'm like, okay, how can we kind of roll that into a video product? And that was the idea of Vitoto. What we ended up landing on was a collaborative video editor. So you could have 5 people at a sports game all record videos from their own seats that were friends, and you could create a kind of a combined video between the 5 people. So it would take each person's different clip and it would stitch it into a collaborative video. That was the idea. Ultimately, the company that won that race was TikTok. But there were lots and lots of video products that were attempting different angles on video solutions, Vidi and Vine and Social Cam. And it was just a lot of products that got launched in that window because it was clear that video was going to be this huge, huge use case on the phone. But back then, it was just really difficult. Data was extremely expensive. So uploading and downloading videos, just 8 and 2 data plan. There wasn't unlimited data plans. The phone battery was very limited. So again, uploading and downloading and consuming a lot of video would just kill your battery. And then also the cloud servers were very expensive too. So using AWS servers to host and edit and process video was also extremely expensive from like the server side. So it was just a money-losing product, right? A user would use it, you'd open it up in an hour, your battery was dead, it had used $50 of your data, plus I'd have to pay like a $50 like bill on the back end to like process this video that was some teenagers at like a party or something. Like it was literally just setting money on fire, this business. But again, the ones who were able to burn through that and survive, your YouTubes or your TikToks or whatever, built massive businesses. So the thesis was right, but I just didn't have the capital and experience to kind of execute on it correctly.
Yeah, but the software pushed that technology. I mean, that's of course the argument is things like this, ones that were successful, but also ones that were not successful, push that envelope in the direction that it needed to go. We need better battery life. We need tighter streams for uploads and downloads. We need better data plans. And so the argument there, of course, is if it worked for that early software, the hardware would not have pushed forward as quickly as it did.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I really like that you highlighted kind of the difference there between a wonderful, brilliant idea and then a wonderful, brilliant business idea. And those are not always the same thing. So that's interesting. I found it really cool that you have a public kind of postmortem on Vitoto that you wrote and published. I don't know if there's anything there, but like what led you to write that? Was that part of having closure and finality for yourself, or you just wanted to share, or how did you kind of come to write that and publish that?
Yeah, it was definitely me writing to myself about mistakes I didn't want to make again next time. Yeah, it was me really just thinking, okay, why did this work? What worked? What didn't work? And just trying to encode that for myself. And then once I'd done that, I'm like, oh, I may as well just publish this. But I think the most important lesson that I found from Vitoto was the combination of the right team and enough runway. So it's very common that people believe that when they build something, it's going to work, right? People have these ideas and they're like, I'm going to build this app and it's going to work. And most of the time, where you think the working level is, like basically the features that you think you need this product to get to product market fit, usually are, especially if you don't have experience doing this before. If you've built 5 companies before, then you already know this, right? But if you're doing this for the first time, it's like you think, okay, I'm going to build these 10 features and that's going to be what we need to get to product market fit. But maybe it's more like 30 features, but also the 5 of the first 10 you built, you also need to like rebuild. And so you think that it's going to take 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, but a lot of the time it's going to take 24 months or 36 months. And it's very difficult to know exactly what it's going to take and how long it's going to take to get to product market fit. If you look at some of these big products today, like Notion, for example, those guys tried to build something. No one used it. They had to cut all their Runway down to 2 people, move to Japan, build it for another 5 years, and then come back. And then they finally got it kind of polished to a point where it had some product market fit. And that's pretty similar to, with Process Street. But with Vitoto, I built a team that my 2 co-founders were senior engineers, business executive and an engineering executive from Australia. And they had families and kids in private school and a very limited runway. And I was like, okay, I raised this much money. This is going to last us 12 months. And let's go build this together and get it to this point in 12 months. Once we got 9 months in, we're like, oh, actually, we're going to need another year before we're going to get this product to the point where it's going to get product market fit. But we're running out of runway in 3 months, and we haven't actually built anything that has traction or retention to the point where it would justify us raising more money. And my team were kind of handcuffed, where they were like, I can't do another 6 months without receiving a paycheck. Like, I literally have a mortgage and children in private school. And so this lack of flexibility in my team's runway was the main reason the business died. Because if the team could say, oh, we're just going to keep testing and iterating for another 2 years, even if we don't get a big paycheck, then we probably would have iterated our way to something that worked, right? Maybe it wouldn't have been the exact vision, but just continuously taking feedback from the market. The next phone would have launched. Like, things would have happened in a way where we probably would have been able to unlock something. But you need that time, and you need a team that understands that there's this high variability in achieving product market fit. And that may take 6 months, or that may take 3 years. And if all you have is 6 months and then you have to stop, you're massively reducing your odds of success. And so I believe I used these words in the post, I don't remember, but I want a co-founding team that's down for the cause, where it's not about some fixed timeline and some fixed result. It's, if we need to go eat ramen noodles for 3 months to get through this, we're going to do it. We're going to just do whatever we need to do to hit product market fit, not we're going to have some type of arbitrary boundary around how long it's going to take or how much work it's going to be. And I think it's really difficult to build something new without a co-founding team that is aligned on that kind of mission.
Yeah, no doubt. I definitely want to get into Process Street now, because that's obviously naturally where this is leading us.
Real quick, this episode is brought to you by Delta Systems, which is what Aaron and I do when we're not talking through microphones to you, the people of the internet. We've got a really, really great software team here, and we love to work with cool people on cool projects. So if that sounds like you and you've got a problem or you're in some kind of a jam, go to deltasystems.com, grab a time with us. We can beat up on your problem together, and if there's a fit there, amazing, we'll help you out. So deltasystems.com, grab an appointment, and hey, maybe we can work together.
So talk us through getting Process Street off the ground. What was the original problem that you were trying to solve? What was the simplest process you were trying to automate or get to?
So the way that we funded Vitoto was mostly from the profits that I had from my marketing business. And I was actually still running that in the background. And I'd kind of been working to put that on autopilot and have that be more of a passive business. And I had got it down to maybe I was working 10 hours a week on that business and 50 hours a week on Vitoto at the time. And so, as I was talking to people, pitching for money, trying to find partners and investors for Vitoto, they're like, how are you funding this? I'm like, oh, I've got this other business that I built and it's like running on 10 hours a week and I built all these systems. And they're like, oh, maybe you should look at what you did in that business to systemize it and consider turning that into some type of product or a startup. And that was the original win that I had and the data that I had. And I knew that a lot of the problems that I had with the existing tools and technology that I was using to try to systemize that business. And so it really was just, okay, well, I took the lessons of Vitoto. I said, I want to build something where, solves a clear problem, has a clear monetization path. The unit economics of the technology are not going to destroy the business. And so I took a lot of these learnings and then I went back into my own business and I said, what would be the thing that would be the most valuable for our business today? Our business was a 20-person remote business, so it wasn't necessarily the best market to go after. This was 2015 or something, way before COVID, and people were working remote before Slack. I probably should have built Slack. That probably should have been the idea that I had, But, we were basically managing most of our processes in Google Sheets and Word. I had a team in India and the Philippines, and I would write these SOPs and documents, and I would send them to them. And then I'd come back and I'd look at the work the next day, and I was like, you didn't follow the process. I wrote it down and you said that you did it, but then when I checked, it wasn't followed. Why didn't you do it? So I was like, how can I build some type of accountability system, some type of way to actually make sure that the process is followed? There's proof that it was followed. There's some type of kind of automated management system in place where it allows people to kind of check themselves and be accountable themselves, and meant that I didn't have to micromanage a team that was operating in a completely different time zone, which I used to have to do at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, this is my main problem. My main problem is doing quality control on the team at 5 o'clock in the morning because that's their time zone. And I was like, okay, if I can solve this problem, this would massively improve my life as the CEO of this business. So let's just build something for me now. And I know that if nobody else wants it, at least I'm going to want it, and I'm going to have one customer of me. And so, yeah, it was really just kind of being frustrated with managing operations, specifically remote operations in different time zones. And I was using Google Sheets and Word. I started researching what all the process tools were available to me. Everything were these enterprise, clunky, IT-dependent, overbuilt products, right? Microsoft SharePoint, Oracle, SAP, there wasn't a Google Sheets kind of equivalent version of a process management tool where you could just sign up and pay $100 a month as an SMB and just self-serve into. And so that was the original idea for the product. I come from Australia, and so one of the companies that we know a lot about or had a lot of exposure to in the startup world in Australia was Atlassian, which is the kind of biggest Australian software company. They built this product called Jira. They're actually one of our investors now, but they built this product out of Australia that was this really enterprise, amazing solution, but was sold. Back then, you'd call it bottoms up. Today, you'd call it with product-led growth, but it was sold without really a sales team. So people were able to just come in and sign up for the product and put in their credit card and adopt it. And so we were like, okay, can we build a Jira or a Google Sheets, but for processes, and work on solving this kind of frustration and this problem that we have on operations? And that was the original problem that we identified, and the way that we went about trying to solve that problem from a product design and business model perspective.
What thoughts kind of went into that to differentiate it from, at the time, and even still, I guess today, there's a lot of very low-level products that I'm going to equate to checklist, right? There's the Todoist and to-do lists and things along those lines. And then there's a chasm, and then there's the enterprise level stuff. So how did you move into that middle level space and kind of differentiate the product so it was bigger, better, more useful than a checklist tool, but not SAP or the big guns?
So I guess the idea for the product and the gap that I saw was that you had your process documentation. So you had your how do you do something, your SOP. And then you have your what to do, which is your to-do list or your checklist, right? And the to-do list was fine. I could give people tasks on what to do, but then they would come back and there would be errors and they'd be incorrect. And I would say, well, didn't you check the process? And they're like, oh yeah, I checked the process, but I missed this step. And so there was this kind of gap between the how to do and the what to do. And so that was the original solution. It's like, well, why don't we integrate those two together and give you a checklist that also explains how to do each step in the checklist. So it's not just a what to do, but it combines the what and the how. So when you need to go and add this person to Salesforce, here are the 6 fields that you have to make sure that you remember when you add them to Salesforce. Or it's kind of like integrating the training in real time. And the idea was not just, can we make the training better? But the idea was, can we increase accountability by integrating them together? So if someone goes and checks off the task, but doesn't follow the instructions on the task that tell you how you're supposed to do that task, it becomes a lot easier to say, well, why didn't you follow those instructions? You checked off that you did that. The instructions are right there on how to do it, but you didn't follow it. And so it kind of created this self-enforcing accountability loop. That was the idea. And it's more of a psychological mechanism, I'd say, than it is really anything else, because once you have trained somebody on that and you give that feedback and you say, look, the instructions are directly there. There is no, unless there's something wrong in these instructions, right? There is no possible excuse for you to not have done this because you have literally checked it off saying that you have done this and followed the instructions. And so that was the idea and that was the differentiator. And we basically started with a recurring checklist where you could add in content. So you could say, here's a video on how to do this task, or here's screenshots on how to do this task. Basically, you could build a little document that was integrated into the task with instructions. Yeah, that's how we started. And we built it for ourselves and we put it out in the market on one of these beta launch sites. And I remember we put it out on like a Friday, and I think we went out with some friends, and then we woke up and we suddenly looked at our phone and there was just like this, just thousands of signups coming in, and we're like, holy shit, what just happened? And that was kind of the beginning.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I guess in terms of like your ideal customers, like who's going to get the most benefit out of Process Street, or is it down market more, or are you more towards enterprise? Or tell me a little bit about your pitch for someone who's your ideal customer.
So at the beginning we built it, we basically just said, we are our ideal customer, right? We're going to build this for ourselves, which essentially was an SMB services business, right? And we started there. We just listened to customers and built what they asked us to build. And that worked pretty well at the beginning. We grew fast. We acquired thousands of customers, not paying us much money, but paying us something. And started getting a lot of great feedback on how to evolve the product with all of that data from the customers. And we didn't even really know our category of product or the competitors. We weren't experts in this space. We were really just kind of first principles trying to solve our own problem. But having all that feedback from the customers and being able to talk to customers, and they're like, oh, well, actually, we want some forms here. And we want to be able to take this process that we designed in a workflow, in a BPMN diagram, and we want to be able to put it into the product and make it follow the branches and the logic and the steps and the approvals. And so we started to take all that feedback, build it into the product. And without even really realizing it, we had built this business process management product, which is very similar to these enterprise tools, but without a lot of the baggage that those products have. So there are like standards for process management. So there's BPMN is kind of like the most common one. It's business process modeling notation. And it's like a language for how you write a process. And if you are a Six Sigma process specialist, or you're like a Toyota Kaizen, like quality management specialist, you know these systems. And most of the process management tools took the system and then designed the product based on this kind of like academic system. Whereas because we didn't really know what we were doing, we just said, what would be the easiest way for you to use this product, Mr. User? Let us build it that way. And we just kind of built it bottoms up based on user feedback and usability, not based on some type of like academic framework that was designed before. And so this made the product much more approachable to people who didn't understand process design, didn't understand IT and technology, and we could sell it directly to an HR team or to an operations team. And that's where we got a lot of our traction initially. But as we built out the functionality and we were able to handle more and more complex processes, we started to see that the customers that were our healthiest customers, the customers that, brought in the most users, built the most processes, retained the longest, were the ones that were using the product for really high stakes work, where there was really a large cost in some way to not following the process. They weren't just building processes because it helped drive efficiency or it allowed the CEO to work 10 hours a week like I was doing. That actually wasn't the main problem that we were solving. The main problem we were solving was, okay, you're doing a healthcare process and there's some type of health and safety risk if this is not done correctly. We have customers that are like nuclear power plants. We have customers that are, in healthcare or manage billions of dollars of money, and where the costs of making mistakes are extremely high. And whether that's someone's health and safety or whether there's a regulator who's going to penalize you in some way for doing something, those were the companies that were really willing to invest in their processes, really put in the time to build these very complex processes, integrate everything, train their team, onboard their team, and maintain those processes over time, because it is work to kind of build and maintain those processes. And once we saw those were our healthiest customers, we really leaned into it. We love the idea of helping the most important organizations on the planet. That's part of our vision. It's how do we enable the most important organizations and businesses on the planet to grow responsibly. I'm a capitalist. I really believe in business and its ability to drive prosperity. But I also believe like there needs to be some checks and balances on businesses. Like I don't want to get in a plane where the pilot hasn't got the correct training and like the plane hasn't done the correct safety checks before takeoff, right? Like it's like I believe there should be airlines and they should be private, but I also believe that there should be some type of regulation to make sure that the planes don't fall out of the sky every day, right? And so that's what we've leaned into, and really because that's what we saw our customers were using the product for most. And that's why we've evolved from just being the process management platform to a compliance operations platform.
Yeah, and it feels like something that's almost like a never-ending stream because especially when you're getting into compliance of any kind, they're changing every year, whether that's just a step here or there or like an entire branch. As you mentioned, these things are always growing. So is there within the system a way for one organization to adopt or utilize a process or workflow that another organization has built? Is there a level of crosstalk, or is it one of those things where it's you get to go in with a clean slate, build exactly what you want and how you need it, and then you're off to the races? How does that kind of quick start, if you will, work?
Yeah. The quick start problem is an interesting problem that we've done a lot of work on. All that exists, right? So you can take existing processes from other businesses. You can take templates. We have AI generators. We have AI importers. So if you already have like a BPMN workflow diagram or something, you can just like import that in and that will build your workflow. But most businesses, their processes are part of their IP and their secret sauce. And so they don't want to share that with other people. TikTok's not going to share their algorithm with you and you can just go, oh, I want to start another TikTok. Let me just take your algorithm. Thanks. Like one click, right? Like they're not down with that. So really a big part of our business is around security and privacy. And we sell to a lot of the most regulated, protective companies and industries in the world. Banks, insurance companies, governments, like I said, nuclear power plants. The sensitivity of their data is high and their IP is a big part of their secret sauce. And so they don't want to share their processes. And so that's a big part of our offering is allowing you to keep your processes in a very secure, private way. But we do try to understand best practices and allow people to adopt the product as quickly as possible. But also every business has its own debt, its own culture, its own operating rhythm, and it's almost impossible for you to take a template, or maybe if you're a really small business, but it's almost impossible for you to take a template off the shelf and use it completely in your own business. It usually requires kind of injecting some tribal knowledge of the business into the process in some way. But it works really well if you have it written down somewhere. So if you already have a document written down, then it's perfect. Yeah, then we can just suck it in and build that with AI really easily.
So you're obviously working your way in. You're utilizing AI in various ways within the system now. You're pushing into that space. And so in a general sense, and we've had several people on to talk about AI specifically, but I'm always very curious is when you're entering into this AI space, whether it's just purely I am doing this in AI or AI is becoming a part of our workflow, kind of a co-pilot or a utility that we leverage, do you have a specific plan or goal in mind? Or is it better to just approach it from the perspective of there are AI tools and I want to figure out a way to utilize them? In other words, is it one way or the other?
Yeah. For us, it's both. We use AI in both ways, both kind of giving you the building blocks as well as putting our own opinion on it in different ways. But the evolution of Process Street is we started with this process management tool, which again, you could think of as like a consumerized version of Microsoft SharePoint or SAP Sedavio. You can build any type of operational process really targeted at the ops team. So like HR, operations, finance, legal, compliance. And you can build workflows that not just help you understand how to do something, but really orchestrate the process. So, hey, a new employee started. Hey, this is your manager. Now you've got to do this. And IT, now you've got to do that. And we need to automate some documents and we need to send them a training video. And all this orchestration of the process can almost be built into like a little app. But we do it in a way that allows enterprises or these sensitive industries to control and govern the processes and have visibility over them. So let's just say you have an employee onboarding process. The way that you onboard an employee, depending on your industry, maybe you're in healthcare or you're in capital markets, if you're managing other people's money, there are certain things you can and can't do, and a new employee needs to be trained on those. And so if you are going to adjust the employee onboarding, if the HR team is going to adjust the employee onboarding process, a lot of the time in a regulated industry, you want compliance or somebody up the chain to have oversight. Like, hey, I want to change the onboarding process to do this so that I do this with a new employee, but I want to make sure that I'm not breaking compliance when I do so, right? And what we've built is we've basically built this system that the operations teams can go off and build and adjust and manage their processes and almost do it like a software engineer would build technology. But with this layer of governance and oversight, which means that if they want to make changes or there are sensitive processes, you can say the compliance team needs to check this before it gets pushed, or the security officer, the chief security officer needs to review this or approve it before this goes live. And we have all these kind of like continuous improvement features that are built into the product that allow you to kind of iterate your operations if you were building products. So the HR team can suggest a change, and then they can test the change, and they can test it before they push it out live. And then they can submit it, and then the compliance team can also test it. And then the compliance team can then approve the change and like push the PR live. And then you can decide, okay, I've got like 6 people who are currently onboarding right now, but I don't want them to see the changes to the process. I only want like the next person that we onboard to see these changes. So I can control whether I'm like pushing my updates in real time or like kind of waiting for the next process to run. So you have all these like continuous improvement and testing and like ways that make it so that you can kind of in real time manage and iterate on your processes without breaking things that are running, without accidentally breaching compliance in some way, but still giving the operations teams control so that there aren't bottlenecks. Like you don't need compliance to go and build every single operational process that's going on in the business. The functional experts can do it with compliance oversight. So that's the core process management tool. But as we've understood that compliance is this really important component to processes, like the reason that a lot of these teams even want a process tool in the first place is because compliance has told them to do something in a certain way. Compliance has told HR, hey, you have to onboard and train people in this way. If you don't, we're going to lose our license as a broker, right? So now HR is like kind of scared, right? They're like, hey, look, I want to make sure that I onboard these employees in the right way and give them the best experience, but I also want to make sure that I'm not breaching compliance. And so to do that, I need to have a more structured system. I can't just kind of do this on a whim every time we get a new employee, which you might be able to do in a marketing agency or something, because there isn't that level of risk. And so as we've understood that the processes that most of our customers are building have some type of compliance connection, right, up the chain somewhere, we're like, okay, how can we build more functionality and products to take on more of that compliance burden for the organization? So what we've done is we've actually evolved the product from just being this process management tool to a compliance operations platform. And what that actually means in practice is that we've launched 2 other products. So we've launched a product called Docs, which is our document management system. And so something similar to like Google Docs, but with all these compliance functionality features built into them. So when you need to have a certain type of compliance certification, so say you're a public company and you have to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, or you're a venture fund or a hedge fund and you need to be a registered investment advisor, or you're a startup and you need to be SOC 2 compliant, or you're a healthcare service provider and you need to be HIPAA compliant, right? These are all different like compliance requirements in different industries. All those different compliance requirements require you to have some type of audited playbook or audited set of documentation and processes that get audited every year. So you might need to have like a disaster recovery plan, or you might need to have a security policy. And these need to be kept recent and updated. So every year they need to be like, someone needs to go in and say, is this still up to date? And they need to sign, yeah, this is still up to date. They need to be acknowledged. So when a new employee comes in, or every year, everyone in the team has to say, I read this, I acknowledge I read it, I signed it. There needs to be all these version control and approval control systems. So if you do want to make a change to the security policy, it has to get escalated to the chief security officer to make that change. So there's all these kind of governance and control mechanisms that you need in a compliant, ready document management system that you don't get in just a standard Microsoft Word or whatever. So that's what Docs is. It's not like the most groundbreaking product. There are plenty of document management systems products out there that have the same functionality. The real difference is that it's part of our platform, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then the third product is our AI compliance agent, which is Cora. And if you think about what a compliance team does, the main function of a compliance team is to watch the external changing regulations and standards. So, Trump is signing executive orders all over the place. Tariffs, we need to consider that. Or ISO is launching a new standard. Or the new AI ISO just came out, for example, like the ISO 40,000, which is like the AI governance standard. And so like there's new regulations coming out. So the compliance team is constantly watching all the new regulations that are changing in the external world. And then they're coming in and they're making sure that all the operations of the business are following those regulations and that their business isn't exposed to some type of risk somewhere, right? And so what we've done with Cora is we've tried to build a co-pilot for the compliance teams that basically help with a lot of that work. So it's constantly scanning changing regulations, all the executive orders, the standards that are being updated, regional regulations, like, oh, the EU just banned this chemical from food right now. Like, you need to consider that in your product line. And then it's coming in and it's scanning the internal operations. So it's scanning your processes, your workflows, your tasks, your documentation. And it's flagging, hey, there was a regulatory change over here. You should come down and take a look at this document or this workflow. And where it gets really fancy is we can kind of connect everything down the chain, right? So maybe you've got a security ISO standard that's changed, and you've got a security policy document that says, okay, when you terminate an employee, you need to remove their access within 48 hours. And that's like an ISO standard or a SOC 2 standard, and that's dictated by the actual framework, by the certification. But if they change that and say, oh, actually, now it's going to be 24 hours instead of 48 hours, let's say, we can come in, we can scan the security policy and say, hey, we notice your security policy is out of date. It says 48 hours, not 24 hours. But then down the chain, we can say, okay, we know that this employee termination workflow is connected to the security policy. And it has an SLA on the workflow that says when someone's terminated, their keycard needs to get removed within 48 hours. And we have like an SLA with escalation. So after 12 hours, it'll escalate to 18 hours, it'll escalate to 24 hours. So like, you know that it has to get done within that time. It can come in and scan like the workflow and say, hey, I see you've got an SLA here that's set to 48 hours. Your upstream regulation and policy has changed. So you should come down here and adjust like your SLA on this employee termination workflow to keep it compliant with the upstream changes. So by having everything on the same platform, it allows you to integrate the waterfall effect of your external regulations to your policies, to your actual operational execution and processes.
That's amazing. Jessa, we're kind of coming up on time. Anything else for you?
Yeah, I probably just one closing question here is like, if you could pick like one or two nuggets to share with folks who are somewhere ahead of you or before you on their entrepreneurial journey, what's something you've learned with your career and with all the experience that you've had that you would pass on, something you wish that you'd known when you were younger?
Yeah, I think the big thing, like if I was to start another company right now, I would have a clearer strategy than just like build it for myself and kind of iterate my way there. So I'd pick a much clearer ICP. It's a lot easier for us to sell process sheets today saying that we're a compliance operations platform than it was saying that we can build any process for any business. And so having a clearer strategy around like what problem you're going to solve, who you're going to target, what part of the market you're going to target makes life a lot easier for a lot of reasons. And I would avoid having a kind of horizontal strategy that doesn't have a clear ICP.
Yeah, that's absolute gold. I think that having that really crisp ICP makes marketing easier and finding people easier, networking easier, and then people see that you're solving a problem for them specifically, so they're more excited about what you're doing. And I think that's a big nugget. Wilbur is letting me know that he's very ready for his morning walk, so we might want to wrap it up here.
You bet. We're coming up on time anyway. Vinay, this has been really super educational. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights and your talents.
Absolutely. No, this has been so much fun.
Yeah, I actually have probably a dozen more questions, so we might have to have you back on the pod.
Anytime. Yeah, it's been really fun. Appreciate it, guys.
Excellent. Well, we've been talking to Vinay Patankar, co-founder and CEO of Process Street, among other things. Vinay, where and how can people reach you?
Yeah, you can find our website at process.st, or you can find me on LinkedIn just under my name, Vinay Patankar.
Very good. And special thanks as always to our listeners. If you like what you're hearing, have ideas for the show, or just want to tell us what's on your mind, hit that like button, throw a review our way, or subscribe if you are so inclined. And we will see you all next time on SaaS That App. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for cruising along with us on SaaS That App. We hope you grabbed some insights that were inspiring, actionable, or at least entertaining.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep those apps sassy.